All right. Thank you for joining me for this very special bonus episode of Parenting Wins Now. This episode is unique in that we're going to be really niching down on homeschooling and the philosophies that Annika and I like the most. Annika. So, for those of you who are watching this, feel free to message us. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to help walk you through it. There's a Facebook group. So, yeah, without further ado, Annika, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Katie. You asked if, I had any nuggets, some motherhood, homeschooling nuggets, and I do, and I want to start with two passages of scripture, if that's okay. The first would be Psalm 139, 13 through 16.
In the notes.
For you have formed me, you have formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and your book were all written, in your book, all written, the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of me. And then in Matthew 19, verses 13 and 15, then some children were brought to him so that he might lay hands on them and pray. And then the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, let the children alone and do not hinder them from coming to me, for the kingdom of belongs to such as these. After laying hands on them, he departed from there. I picked these two because my nugget that the Lord gave me was to explain to me in my heart that I didn't make these children that I'm raising. They were made in me. They were fearfully and wonderfully made by a creator that loves them infinitely more than even I do. And my job is to get them from point A, whenever they enter the world and my family and my home. I have 3 natural born children and 1 adopted. So when they came in, from that point on, I'm responsible for training them up in the ways of the Lord and the way he created them. They're each unique, fearfully and wonderfully made. And to get them to that place in adulthood where they're flying. Now, I always want to have a nest that my little birdies can fly back to and wrestle with things of the Lord or the world, or, share their struggles. I want that, but I have to build it. I hear parents lament all the time. Their adult kids are making mistakes and they're not coming to them, or they just won't listen to me. And I've learned if I just trust the Lord, what his word says, that they will. And I have 2 adult children, and they call me all the time, anytime, day or night, and say, Mom, can you talk? Because I'm going to listen. So that's kind of a huge point, that we would show our children in the abundance, more abundantly, the grace to them as we parent, as we need from God every day. I make mistakes all the time. I can be edgy or anxious, and then that can come across as like being short fused. But if I try to show them that grace every day, that I need, remember that they need it as well. And that the key point, to apologize often as needed, and not for silly things like, or not like, sorry that happened, but really just genuinely like, hey, I was short with you. I apologize. That genuineness, they need it. Children, another little nugget, children do well if they can. And that is a quote from a Dr. Ross Green, who has great books on challenging children. But it was a huge lesson for me to learn in home educating, because sometimes they can't do it. Sometimes, and if we stick with, well, they're sinning, they're not doing it. If we stick with that rigidness and we aren't full of that grace that God pours in us, we can have really unrealistic expectations. So giving them developmentally appropriate, not age appropriate, developmentally appropriate skill sets. What are we working on? You don't give a 2-year-old a chore to tie his shoes. And yet in the homeschool community, we hear, we score higher, and there's all these great worldly expectations of our home educated students that, and even in the world, my public school friends, same thing, Christian school friends, we have all these standards, and, oh, Johnny is not making that. And maybe they're just not able to. So that phrase, children do well if they can, I akin it to, we have land, and on it we try to manage it. My family hunts, and I know that can be controversial, but we realized we weren't seeing as many deer or whatever, because it was a rundown property. So over the years, we've cultivated that land. We've carved out trails, and we mow them, and dig out ruts. And the deer are sinfully lazy, just like us, I guess. So they love those paths. So now when I go for a walk, I can see them any time of the year. I can see the turkey and all the little critters, because we've trained the path. Does that make sense? We're cultivating, we're snipping the branches. If a tree falls over, we're chopping that down and getting it out of the way, taking care of those obstacles. And so it is like raising children. Life's going to have obstacles, and the weeds will try to take over. And rocks, believe it or not, just sort of migrate to the surface and trip you up. And so I think the big nugget for me has been, like, if they can't do well, if a subject is a struggle, then I need to find out, is it a heart issue? Is their heart far from me? Did something happen? Are they having a sibling conflict, or are they feeling insecure because they're struggling with a skill set? If I give them an assignment to write a paper, which I did years ago to my daughter, and she just had a meltdown, and I couldn't figure out, is this a sin thing? Like, is she just defying me? Because she was defiant in her spirit. But I sought the Lord in prayer, and I remembered this, like, children do well if they can. It's optimal. It's easier to do well, because then there's no conflict. Nobody loves conflict, right? It means maybe privilege is lost. It could mean a lot of uncomfortable things for a kiddo. And I just prayed, and I asked her, like, what part of this is hard? And it was writing. She had dysgraphia. And so through that process, she's like, can I just tell you the story? Can I, we got a dragon speak easy thing. I think that's what it's called. And so she could tell it in a microphone to the computer, and it would type it up, and then she could erase, the mistakes. Cause just like when I've got my Google thing, I'm texting you over the voice, and it turns out I've, jumped into a barbecue pit or something crazy. But it was that, what is making it so hard for you to do this? And how can I help you? Because that's my job, right? If I'm a coach, if I'm a trainer, I need to come alongside and say, where are you at? And how can I get you on the path you're going to be on? And it looks different for each kiddo. But if I just make the assumption, and I just have my standards and my rules, they're never going to live up to it. And they're never going to be able to say, hey, I need help with this. Because as adults, they need to identify, and I struggle with, I don't know about you, struggling, like, why do I feel anxious? What is troubling me? Why am I edgy as I'm, chopping up the carrots in the kitchen? Like, what's going on? And learning to identify that, so that I can take it to the Lord in prayer. That's something I want to give my kids, that skill set. So I think giving them and guiding them and training them is about equipping them with that developmentally appropriate skill set, and not having unrealistic expectations in our own heart about, well, the neighbor kid's a grade behind and doing more. It doesn't matter, because, the tortoise and the hare, you got to go at the pace that's right for you. And some of us have a hare for a child, and they're just running circles and they're not getting anywhere. So there's that. So I just think it's key to remember that we're not making them. They are made. And we're called to love them and nurture them, to guide them and train them up in a way that's very different, that's very unique. And he trusts us to get them from that point A to point B with inflicting the least amounts of damage. We're damaged people, most of us. Haven't met any that aren't. We're wounded souls, and hurt people. So kind of keeping in mind that they're his, and he made them, and he's trusting us. If I remember that, then I remember to be careful with that crystal vase. It's not mine. I didn't make it. It's delicate. It's fragile. I don't want to break it, but I need to use it every day to keep that shine on, or it'll just get dusty. So I need to participate and enjoy it because it's his. And I think just like our children, we need to enjoy them and read books. And I think, when you and I talk homeschooling, it is snuggling up at the couch with them, and it's reading to them, and it's not lecturing them, because sometimes, Nellie is so naughty in the little Laura Ingalls Wilder books. She's so naughty that you could do a whole sermonette on her, but you have to just trust the work he's doing. And then someday when you're making supper or washing the dishes, somebody's going to say, that Nellie, 3 days after you've read it, or 3 weeks, that Nellie, she just, like, the Lord puts that character on their heart and be like, I don't want to be like that. Or so-and-so treats me like that when we go to the park. And how do I handle that, Mom? And so I'm rambling. I'm sorry, but
it's so good. I mean, yeah, just keep going.
but if I have all these expectations of them, like, you will do this. I remember a big popular phrase a decade ago was, do what I say, do it right away, do it with a God-pleasing attitude.
Oh, wow.
And I know a lot of families have heard that and they've used that, but it also tells me that I'm telling them to not think when authority tells them something. I'm telling them to do it on my timeline. I'm not giving any consideration for what else could be going on right then. And I'm telling them to fake it. Fake it. Put on a shiny, happy face, even if your best friend just was so hurtful on the phone, and I don't care, because you're going to do what I say. You're going to do it right away. I don't have time to listen to you or your excuses, right? And you need to fake it and give me a God-pleasing attitude.
As if pleasing God were the goal.
Right.
I mean,
right.
So if you're honest about the gospel, like, right. So I need to be careful what I say, because that could be really misunderstood. So here's what I think about that. Yes, absolutely. We are creators. We fall into a certain order. We are not God.
Right.
We are his creation. So we fall into a certain order. But if we're coming, the gospel says that we're not coming to him as people who could ever please him. The words
exactly.
Our works are filthy rags.
Exactly.
And when I heard you say, do it now, do it with a pleasing attitude, like, and that's faking it. Like,
it is.
God never asks us to fake where we're at. Now, does that mean that we never mature into people who can show up with a smile under difficult circumstances? No, that is the picture of maturity. Is that I've dealt with my heart, and whatever disappointment I have, I've dealt with that before God. Therefore, I can go out and serve with a joyful attitude, even when life is falling apart. But it doesn't mean pretending that life isn't falling apart, or that we just, quote this thing and now we're good. Because we all know that doesn't work. And if anything, it alienates us from our children.
And it alienates them from the Lord, because he ordained for us to parent them, to nurture them, to to be a joyful part of this transition from infancy to adulthood, or for however long they're in our lives. That is such a gift. And that relationship that we build with them will be something that they can say, well, I can go to God with this. Mom trusted God, and I trust mom and dad. Like they are genuine. They never asked me to lie or fake it. They were patient with me, long suffering with me. That means we actually have to be that. We have to be those things that Christ calls us to be. He says, "Be holy, for I am holy." I have to just pursue my relationship with the Lord so that I can, out of that, there can be an outpouring of that grace and love and patience that he shows me to them. Like I get to be the conduit. Like we're literally the vessel,
Right.
cracked and broken, but we're that vessel, and he's pouring into us and we're pouring into them. And we can't do that if we have those expectations, if we don't understand that children do well if they can. I do well if I can. Don't you? I mean, if you can, you're
Yeah.
going to shine. And if
Right.
you're struggling with something, how much better to say, I can't do this. This is embarrassing, or this is hard. And we struggle to do that. Why would I expect my 3-year-old to to miraculously be like, oh, well, I am developmentally not prepared to do what my older siblings are doing, so I will just be patient? No, they're going to flip out and be like, I don't understand why I can't run that fast, and I don't understand why I can't tie my shoe. And then they're on the ground in the middle of the grocery store sobbing because they tried to run, they tripped and fell over their shoelace, and they can't fix it, and it's overwhelming. And it's those moments that as a mom, we kind of want to pull our hair out, just like, oh, but it's also in those moments we have to just say, hey, if you could, I know you would, and you're making progress, and you're gonna get there.
Yeah.
How can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to help you tie your shoe? Should we practice running in the yard every day? You're so fast, and just walking through those ways. Does that make sense?
I love that. I just love that. I know. I sit and I enjoy my kids now in a way that I never could before. And I have to just give myself grace for that too, because I was showing up with just as much heart then as I am now.
Right.
But I have a decade of growing in receiving the grace from God.
Amen.
And that has made all the difference. And so, like, even though we're in COVID, like, I'm like, ooh, how do they need me to show up for them? Their personalities are so different from mine. They don't need me to, you know, cheer them on to go do something creative in the backyard. That's not where they're at. But finding out how I can come alongside them and encourage them right where they're at. I love that, and give them grace, just like you were saying at the beginning, just like I've received it.
Yeah. And it's hard to do that, and to remember we can be anxious for nothing. I mean, the fact that God tells us not to fear or be anxious 365 times, it's at least one a day for this weary soul. Like, hey, he has them. He loves them. I need to just love them and train them. What skills do they need? What patience will they need? COVID's a great time to talk about, hey, you guys are being super patient with waiting on all of this. You guys are being so kind to one another. Like, and just finding the moments, even if they're fighting 98% of the time, that 2%, you got to be like, hey, you guys, really appreciate how much you've grown. This would have been really hard, had you not shown that grace to your brother.
You're giving me an idea right now. So even though my sons are 16 and going to be 18 in 2 days,
Wow. Happy birthday. I
I
know. Wow.
I'm like grieving that, because I'm like, I had such pictures of what that would look like, and we're weird too, because he graduated like 3 years ago. He's one of those run ahead people, and his brother has also graduated this year, 3 years early.
Okay.
And we don't have the sign in the yard that says our person graduated, and so, like, there's this weird mix of our sons doing these really amazing things.
Yeah.
with their skills, talents, and abilities. And what you're talking about just now reminds me, like, as a mom, I get to show up and be the one that says, I see you. I
Yep.
see what you're doing that works. And I
Yep.
just want you to know I'm so proud of the right choices you're making.
Yeah.
And you're not doing it for the approval of man. You're not doing it for the approval of me. You're doing it because you figured out that it's okay to try and learn and go
Right.
do. And I'm just, yeah, like you're reminding me, like, I need to make a special moment. Like, so we're recording this on a Thursday. I need to make a special moment every week where I just edify my kids. And I don't mean just
Yeah.
the one-offs, because I do that all the time. That's kind of my personality. But really just saying, if you were a complainer, this would just be so much harder.
Right.
And thank you for not doing that.
Right. You're really
And they can
no,
have
you're hitting it.
conversation. Yeah,
You're hitting it on the head.
where they're like, well, actually, I'm complaining in my heart. And even if it goes to that, like, how great is that? Because now we get to talk about what's real. And
What's going on? Well, and that was why I chose that second passage, because Jesus said, let them come to me. They were going to him on their own, on something, maybe the power of the Holy Spirit drawing them to Jesus. And so often we sort of attack the children with how they have to go to him, and I think
yeah.
we get in the way.
Mhm.
And it's one of the things I love about the Carol Joy Side method is we present, it's just part of who we are. We're showering our home with Jesus, like bathing it in the Bible and the gospel story, but we're not being Pharisees.
Mhm.
Hey, here's the rules. You better do this. You better do what I say, do it right
Mhm.
away, right? All that. We're
Mhm.
not doing that. We're letting them come to him because we're living a vibrant, authentic, real relationship right before their eyes. If we're humble enough to say, Mommy was growly while she was making dinner, and I'm sorry. And something upset my heart and wasn't you. And I need to, when we own it,
Yeah.
they see that, and then they trust in it, and we aren't in the way. We don't become the stumbling block to their faith. And I love that Jesus rebuked the disciples. They were disciples. They were great. He chose them, but they could easily get in the way. Does
Mhm.
that make
Oh, yeah. That's so good. And I think that's a great foundation for talking more about methodology. I'm not sure if you wanted to talk more
we
about.
can?
So I'm